Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? It's your boy Isaac,
And this is your boy Bryce.
and we are brothers on tennis. And, folks, we've got a fantastic interview for you today. We met this gentleman recently at the Taste of Tennis event in Indian Wells, and man, oh man, was it an honor. And we are absolutely looking forward to talking with him. Bryce, you and I, man, we chopped it up with Omar for a good bit, and I know that you and I have both been very excited for this interview.
Absolutely. And, for our viewers and listeners out there, however you're checking this interview out, um, the guy we have on here today is just really a person for the books. I mean, let's just start off with at the most basic point, you call him a footwear design entrepreneur, right? That's what he does. But he doesn't just do it like that. I mean, this guy has worked with celebrities all across the globe. Jay-Z, Terry Crews, Questlove, Allen Houston, Jalen Ramsey. He's also worked with major brands like K-Swiss, New Balance, Timberland, Adidas, or I always get confused. Should I say Adidas or should it be Adidas? But we're in the States now, so we'll go with Adidas. Um, just a big name in the game. And one of the things that I'm excited to talk to this guy about is it's one thing to be a designer, but it's another thing to make the proactive decision that I'm also going to learn the full game. I'm going to learn the contract manufacturing side. I'm going to learn the supply chain side. I'm going to understand everything that's a part of my business. Today, he is the co-founder and CEO of Factory Lab in LA, where he continues to work on collaborations with athletes and influencers and designers. And today, although we're going to talk a little bit about that, we're going to talk mostly about how he got involved in tennis, his love for tennis, and maybe what are some things coming down the road for tennis. If you want a really good way of diving into his background, please check out the Roku original series Visionaries with Keanu Reeves. Season 1, Episode 3, The Mind of Omar Bailey, Inspiration from the Game. So we will have links to that show in our notes, so please make sure you check that out. But without further ado, let's bring him on, Isaac, our guy, Omar Bailey. Welcome to Brothers on Tennis.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. That was some intro. I love that. I'm gonna have to bring you everywhere with me to do that.
That's right. That's right. We'll be your hype guys, man. Omar, it's awesome having you on here, man. It's so great seeing you again. Like I said, we chopped it up a good bit at a lot of the Indian Wells events. Again, Taste of Tennis. I think you were over there at Desert Smash. Just talk to us, just in general, or talk to the people. I know we know a lot of the little things about you, but let's start off just with your background as a whole, so folks get to know who Omar Bailey is.
Yeah. So my story is an interesting one. My mom and my dad are from Jamaica. They moved to America in the '70s, and had me and my younger sister in New York. I was born in the Bronx, and then something really interesting happened at the age of 7 years old, and I drew my first sneaker. At that time, we were planning on relocating from New York to Florida, and this was this was early '90s. And at that same time, if you remember, the sort of the sneaker Jordan craze was kind of at the beginning. It hadn't really emerged the way that it did. Michael Jordan was on top of the world. The Be Like Mike Gatorade commercials and the Nike commercials and the Hanes commercials, and it was just like Michael Jordan everything. People forget like how consumed we were with Mike, but Mike was that dude. And it affected everyone in a positive way. And when the shoes became part of his narrative, it just created a frenzy. And we hadn't seen lines wrapped around stores of people waiting to go and buy the shoes and things like that. And this was all new. Today it's a normal thing. You see it and it's just like, oh, I've seen that before. But back then it wasn't something we had seen before. So I started drawing sneakers early in my career because part of it was part of it was because of that time created, yes, it was fun and it was great, and like, the shoes and the sneakers and all that stuff was going on, but it also created a lot of negativity as well. There's a lot of violence that occurred, around the shoes, people getting jumped and beat up for their shoes, and mall stampedes and all kinds of stuff. And my family didn't want me to be a victim of any of that stuff. When we relocated to Florida, I went to a school that was, not in the greatest of neighborhoods, which, is the case for a lot of people of color. If I'm being honest, you go to, these schools in these rough areas, and that's just kind of par for the course, right? So, that is where a lot of this violence and a lot of this stuff was happening. And, my parents made the decision that, like, we're not going to buy him these shoes and put him at risk of getting jumped or beat up or anything like that for a shoe. So, that necessity or that need or hunger that I had for wanting those cool shoes transitioned into me sketching them and drawing them on paper. And I would say that's where the passion and the love really came for designing shoes on paper. And, I just followed this path from there where, I was able to get out of that rough school and get in transition into an art school that had more people who were, I had peers who were thinking about college and their careers and what they wanted to do, when they grew up. And I was around more diverse people, and it was the complete contrast. I went from a school where I was more concerned about my survival, to now a school where, like, I'm thinking about my future, in a real way, that can be manifested through these teachers who believed in me. And I'm seeing other kids my age who are who have dreams, goals, and aspirations to go to college and to develop careers. So, that was a huge cultural shift, for me, in having that, and the passion and the excitement for, creativity and making things and designing shoes was there. And my teachers wrapped their arms around me and supported me, and I was able to, follow that all the way through into college, where, I studied industrial design. I went to a small design school in Detroit, Michigan, then transferred to University of Cincinnati. That led me to doing a handful of Adidas, and a few others. And yeah, and that was sort of the start for me, man. But it all started back then as a 7-year old, and every day I still feel like that same 7-year old getting to do what it is that I love to do.
That's incredible. When I watched the Visionaries series, and to the people out there, you've got to watch it. It was an incredible, incredible episode. Um, One of the things that I walked away with was a feeling that you had an incredible level of focus on what you were doing. It was almost kind of like you were driven to do this thing. Um,
Hmm.
Outside of the designing the shoes and the sneakers, and building your skill set there, were there other things as a youngster that you were into? Like, were there sports? Were you really into music?
Yeah. That's a great question. And there was a couple things that I was interested in that might catch people by surprise a bit. So, I obviously grew up playing sports. Like, I thought I was going to be the next Michael Jordan, like we all did. And I wasn't tall enough or skilled enough to do that. So I figured, well, let me design shoes for Michael Jordan, and that would be, for Michael Jordan like players, and do that instead. But if I wasn't doing what I was doing, there was two things that I was really fascinated by. One was architecture, specifically designing sports arenas and stadiums. I loved, like, especially baseball stadiums. Baseball stadiums, I would say, of all the sports, when you think about football, basketball, baseball, even though it's been changing, a little bit, but baseball has been the one where, like, the stadiums are all uniquely just unique to the city that they're in, to the team that it's for. You have stadiums that have swimming pools in the outfields and Ferris wheels and, like, all kinds of wild stuff. So, like, that just made me really intrigued. And I used to draw and sketch, like, stadiums. I would get these big pieces of paper, from school, and I would, like, map out, like, these architecture plans for different types of ballparks and stadiums. And I would have definitely tried to go on that path and intern for one of these architecture firms, like, try and figure out how to design baseball or sports arenas and stadiums. And then the second thing that I was interested, that's kind of related, which is also a bit random, was I was always obsessed with the grounds crew at a baseball stadium and the way they prepare the field before the games, and like the way they cut the grass and the lawn, and like how they do the prep and how pristine those fields look before, a match or a baseball game, or a football game would start. So like, I remember seeing some documentaries in the past that I was able to find, like some John Deere documentaries, and there's like this grass master, and like, he's talking about how like meticulous he is about taking care of the grass and the way they cut the patterns and all that. I don't know, there was something that I just found really interesting, about that. And I'm still sort of intrigued. I follow a couple random like Instagram guys who actually do like field maintenance for like the LA Rams and like the Dodgers and stuff. And like they have like a little following on Instagram. And yeah, I'm still like intrigued by that. Maybe one of these days I'll see if I can do like a, like bring a friend to work type of day or something. Contact one of my friends over at the Dodgers.
Omar, that is so funny, man. That is awesome. Talk to us a little bit more, piggybacking on that, the whole baseball, I guess, piece of it, because we know that you've kind of worked with, I believe it was Batista and
Mhm.
Sheffield, and I think
Yep.
there was Craig Monroe.
Yep.
Did your love of baseball kind of drive really your wanting to work with baseball players in regards to building a shoe? I mean, how did all of that come about?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I know this is a tennis show, but yeah, I obviously love tennis, and we'll get into that. But baseball was something that I did grow up watching with my dad. My dad was a baseball fan, and I was always, what it was for me was, aside from the sport itself, it was the product. It was the product on their feet and the way that it looked, and like that stuff just like grabbed my attention, man. You're watching on TV and you just, the way the cleats and the upper and the sole and it all, comes together. So like, yeah, for me, anything sports related was just like really like sports related, where you could design a product or create something. I felt like that was like the perfect combination of me combining my creativity and with those sports, or merging my creativity with those sports. And having the opportunity to work with Gary Sheffield and Craig Monroe and Shannon Stewart and then Jose Bautista. It was amazing. And like, it really was sort of a childhood dream fulfilled, in being able to work with these gentlemen who, Jose is still a good friend of mine to this day. Chef and I still are in communication. So like, it's just awesome. Like, when I reflect back and just kind of think on those moments and being able to go to games and spring training games and getting to be around those guys, as like a young pup, like I wasn't, I was figuring it out, like I didn't have all the answers. It was never always like peaches and cream. I wasn't making a lot of money, at all either, even though I was with these guys, but that didn't mean anything, but it was still fun, like for me to, be there and do that and just to have that experience on my belt. So yeah, that influenced the stadium designs and the baseball cleat designs, just the love of the game and the love of the sports, not just baseball, but other sports as well, that really, like I said, drove my creativity and allowed me to merge that creativity back with that sport.
It's interesting how paths cross. I mean, first of all, even how we met, through our guy Nicholas Monroe.
Yep,
that
yep.
was
Shout out
awesome.
to Nick. Shout out to Nick doing his thing on Tennis Channel.
Nick Monroe, that's our brother from another mother right there.
Yeah.
But something that you just mentioned that we have not talked about, that we'll probably chop this up more off air than we will here, is hearing that you were there at the University of Cincinnati. And Cincinnati is where Isaac and I met.
Yep.
We
Oh,
were
did not know
both
that.
young. Yes, we were both young IT professionals working for Procter and Gamble.
Yep.
Oh wow.
Uh, yeah, that's where we actually met. So we have a huge love and history there with Cincinnati.
Oh wow, I had no idea. Yeah, I'm real familiar with P&G, of course. Yeah, all my
Yeah,
colleagues would get internships there.
absolutely, absolutely. So we will talk more about that offline because I'm
For
sure the
sure, for
listeners
sure.
don't care about that. But I did want to take it to the next step, which is so we've talked about, your love of baseball as a youngster. Where did tennis come into play?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tennis, tennis came in when I met my wife, who was at the time my girlfriend, and this was 2011. And it's a funny story. She said my wife is from Long Island, and that's where her family still lives, in Syosset, actually very close to the to Sports Time, John McEnroe's club. That's out there. I know he's got a bunch in New York, but there's one like just out like in Syosset or just outside of Syosset, that's there as well. And like a lot of my wife's friends, when she grew up on Long Island, she grew up playing tennis. She wasn't like a tennis player or pro or anything like that, but she would play. Or she was in
Mhm.
camps and different things and all that stuff. So she knew how to hit a ball consistently over a net, which is an important thing to be able to do in tennis. So she had the basic foundation in doing that. So one day we were hanging out at her parents' house, and we were watching a tennis tournament. We were watching a match. It was probably a Nadal match because I'm a huge Nadal guy. So like, we were always watching his matches, and somehow we got into this like started talking a little like a little smack to each other, like, oh, like she's like, I can kick your butt on the tennis court. And I was like, yeah, I'd like to see it. And she's like, all right, well, let's go. And then there was a tennis court in their community that they lived in, and we grabbed a couple of kids rackets that were in the garage, and we went over there, and sure enough, she kicked my butt. Like it was my first time swinging a tennis racket, which is crazy because I grew up in Florida, and tennis is obviously very big there, but tennis doesn't always like make it to our communities, right? And it's like not really a thing that you even think about or thought about. And but in that moment when she kicked my butt, it was a couple of things that drove me. One was I really enjoyed the sport because I was always a fan and I always watched. I just never really thought about or tried playing before. And then two, the fact that she kicked my butt, I wanted to return the favor. So I was like, I said, you know what? I said, give me 3 months. I'm gonna take some lessons, and I'm gonna return the favor. And I'm a pretty dedicated person when I make my mind up on something that I wanna do. And I became pretty hell bent and focused on that. And I immediately started taking lessons with instructors that were in the area. I was living in Queens at the time and playing at a nearby park. And I was able to find people to that I could go and hit with, and just start learning the basics, how to build the foundation, how to consistently hit a ball over the net. And it looks a lot easier than it actually is when you start playing, and then they start telling you things you have to hit up so the ball goes down, and it's like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. How does that happen? It's like, and like, and all those nuances. But man, I loved it. And like, I was again, I was an entrepreneur, so I was a freelancer. So I made my own schedule, so I definitely worked in time to continue going to the court and hitting. And I did it. And I was probably out there 4 or 5 days a week, man, like hitting
Wow.
and
Go.
practicing and watching. That was the other thing I would say is like watching. Really, when you're learning how to play tennis, like watching also helps a lot. Like you're able to just see the game a little bit differently and like process it. And like it's like, okay, I should be hitting the ball like this in that situation, or this or that, or like focus. It's just all these little things. It just kind of makes more sense when you're learning to play and you're watching at the same time. And to put sort of a cap on that story, I was able to return that favor, and and lay it down on the tennis court, the way that I did. So I still had still growing and stuff like that. But I took it serious. And for the next few years, man, it was just like I was just locked in, and I just wanted to learn and just get better and better and better. And then my USTA ranking started going up. I started playing in leagues. I started in a 2-0 league, then a 2-5, then a 3-0, then a 3-5, and did the whole bit. And my game got pretty good. I would say I have a really good, like, above average forehand. My backhand is solid and strong. And, my serve has improved a lot over the last few years now. But, I feel real comfortable out there. I feel like, now it's been almost 15 years now since I started playing, 14 years, I think, to be exact, 13 or 14. So, like, I feel real comfortable. Actually played this morning for a couple of hours before coming into my office. And, it just, yeah, it's a beautiful thing when, like, all those things that you've been learning and it kind of clicks and comes together, and, you have more control over the ball, and, like, you can think through your points a little bit more. It's like the game slows down a little bit because you know what you're doing out there, a little bit more. And I look forward to continue playing for the rest of my life. They say tennis adds another 9 years onto your life. So, I'm excited about that.
That is awesome. Omar, I'm curious here. So there's always sort of a shot that someone just sort of just you intuitively pick up. When you started playing and when you just got out there, what was that shot? Was it the forehand? Was it the backhand? Was it the serve? What intuitively came to you or just naturally felt comfortable, if anything?
My forehand, 100% the forehand shot. And I'm a big Rafa Nadal fan, so that also has a lot to do with it. Yeah, but no, 100% the forehand shot, and that became my weapon. Like, that was the shot that, like, when that thing gets going, our friend Nick Monroe got a little something to say about that too when we were at the Desert Smash, and I hit a couple forehand winners down the line on him on the other side, and he was like, "Oh, we doing
Okay.
that?"
I love
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Yep. So
Well,
that's my shot.
well, I tell you what, another something offline here. We got to get out. We all got to get out and play.
Yes.
Because
We have to.
actually, Isaac and I are playing tomorrow morning with a couple of our other buddies.
Nice.
But yeah, we're gonna definitely have to do that.
Absolutely. You tell me when and where, and, like, let's make it happen. I'm always down.
Well,
Always. I always grab all my rackets.
funny enough, we're actually playing over at Balboa, which isn't too far away from you. Because aren't you up in
Oh,
the valley?
that's where I played this morning. Played
Yeah.
about Balboa this morning.
Get
Yeah.
out of here.
Played there
There
this
you
morning.
go.
Yeah, man. If I wasn't flying tomorrow morning, I'd be out there with you.
Okay, we're gonna make it happen then. We're
Yes.
gonna make
Yeah.
it happen.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
So okay, so now that's we learned how you got into tennis and how deeply you got into it and what a motivator your wife was for you to get into the game. So when did you first start having thoughts about, well, now I'm liking tennis, I'm doing this whole shoe design thing, maybe there's an opportunity to marry these ideas together?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that, you mentioned that because, tennis, I definitely draw parallels to, like, tennis to the way that I work. And, what I mean by that is, I'm very unique in the sense, and this is something that I just learned over the years, like, in the way that I work. I'm not your traditional designer. Not only do I understand, like, how to make a shoe look good and design it on a piece of paper and do it digitally, but I also understand all the components and aspects of actually building it and bringing it to life and into the market. And that's not something that you see a lot, in the business. Usually designers are designers, and then the people who build the shoes, and then you have the factories. But I spent a significant amount of time abroad, overseas. I lived in China. I lived in India for 3 years. I ran shoe factories in other countries. I had my own shoe factory here, in America, for a while as well. And I've been a student of the game in terms of footwear, and the parallel that I see in tennis is that as I in tennis, in order to be successful, you need to be diverse in your game, right? You need to have that slice. You need to have the drop shot. You need to know when to move forward. You need to know when to stand behind the baseline. You need to know when to approach the net and how to finish a point. And I see myself the same way in footwear. Like, I'm not just a designer, I'm a developer. I understand manufacturing, I understand the development, I understand materials and processes, and what materials work together and which ones don't. And, like, all the nuances in footwear. So there's definitely, a comparison there from that perspective. But I'm excited about all the things that we got coming up. I'm working on a lot of different product. Speaking of sports, like done a lot of work in the NFL. I have about a dozen NFL players that I'm working with, starting with Jalen Ramsey and Trent Williams and Trayvon Walker and Jonathan Taylor, to name a few. I'm developing a cricket cleat right now for
Oh,
a cricket player in India at the moment. Very popular cricket player in India right now. Working on some basketball product, but what I'm most excited about is a tennis shoe that I'm working on right now. That I'm super excited with the person that I'm creating it. Can't say who that is just yet, but that will be revealed very soon. But in the moment, I need to keep that G35 classified. You cannot get that information just yet, but super excited about it. But no, I'm just really excited to be able to build a shoe that I actually can wear and play in. Right. And I wear all my fashion shoes, but like to actually be able, I've worked with NFL guys. I'm not wearing football cleats. I'm definitely ain't going out on a football field trying to hit my
right.
but to be able to play tennis in my own shoe that I create in collaboration with this tennis star, like, is super exciting, and I can't wait until we can reveal who that is and what we're doing together and how we reveal it to the world.
So Omar, question as well as a as a potential request. So as you are developing said tennis shoe for said star, I want to be able to rock me some Omar Bailey tennis shoes as well. So will this be available to the public? Because I don't know. Well, just for the viewers, most of the times when you're developing with an athlete, you're specifically doing it just for that athlete, and I don't know if they're necessarily on market for people to actually buy. So maybe give us a little bit I guess around your tennis shoe. Will it be something that folks like, again, myself and Bryce, that we can rock as well as other tennis players, or are
Yeah.
you specifically going to develop it just for that tennis player and that's it?
So on the football cleat side, you're correct. We developed the cleats specifically for the athlete, and we have not um, transitioned it into a commercial strategy just yet. However, that will be changing in the near future, where we will make those shoes available on a commercial basis. It just takes a little time to kind of figure that stuff out around the business model and everything. But with regards to the tennis shoe, the goal is 100% to make that available to the public. So that will be something that will come out once that all happens, for sure. So you and all the listeners will be able to grab themselves a pair.
That is awesome. I'm glad to hear
Yes.
that for sure. So let me kind of go back a bit into the, the business side of things. So we've talked a lot about you designing shoes for athletes.
Hmm.
Have you done shoes? And I think I already know the answer to this, but I want to hear you talk about like other types of shoes that you've done for non-athletes.
Yeah. So it's funny. So one of our, well, I've done a lot of type of fashion footwear, and that's actually what I think. Factory Lab is probably more so known for now. Sometimes I forget, like, depending on who I'm talking to. I actually just literally had like a NFL player here in the office like about an hour ago, and like I was showing him all the fashion stuff and totally forgot to show him all the football cleats and all the stuff that we're doing. So I always forget sometimes that, because it's really is honestly like Factory Lab in my company, which we get into a little bit as well. It's almost like two companies in one. We're doing the sports stuff and the fashion stuff. But to answer your question about like non athletes, I mean, there's so many of them on the entertainment side. When I first started in the business, I had the opportunity to make shoes for Jay-Z and Lady Gaga and T-Pain and a number, Terry Crews, you mentioned when opening up the show as well. And that's kind of always been one of my sweet spots as well, is like creating unique footwear, whether it was for them individually or available on a commercial perspective, is something that I've always been able to do. I've always been someone who's wanted to be diverse in like in the shoes that I create, which I guess makes a lot of sense when you think about just my knowledge of the business and kind of having my hands in so many different things, it kind of goes to the same for the type of products that I would do. But a couple of projects that really kind of put my name on the map in the shoe space, if you will, is my time at the 3 years that I spent at Yeezy, working for Yeezy, and probably not the most popular person to be talking about right now in Kanye West, but like it was. But I had an opportunity at being the head of the innovation lab there for 3 years, and it was a great experience. We made some incredible product that I was able to lead with my team, and that we were able to launch. And Adidas did extremely well from it, scaling that business up to almost a 3 billion in revenue annually, and we were able to crush it, and I was able to take that knowledge in addition to what I had prior to that, because I had been in the shoe business for quite some time before that role, and then start FCTRY Lab, and then more recently with FCTRY Lab, was able to launch a boot with this young man named NLE Choppa, this rapper out of Memphis, Tennessee, 22 years old, great kid, great family. His mom is amazing. He's amazing, and it's just been an absolute pleasure working with him. But we had the opportunity to launch a shoe together last year called the Duck Boot that went viral very quickly. We sold out very fast after a very calculated sort of rollout strategy that we had for about a month and a half, starting with him performing at Rolling Loud, wearing the boot for the first time in front of 80,000 people, to the few days later, him and I sitting courtside at a Lakers game, to a few weeks later, him and Kai Cenat being on Kai's live stream and him gifting him the shoe on his live stream. And then, a few moments more after that. But, all that kind of led to this excitement and this buzz around this product that led to a sellout. So it was really awesome being able to do that in collaboration with him. And we've since launched a couple more versions of that same shoe. And actually, in the next couple months or so, we're going to be launching a completely new shoe together that we're super excited about sharing with the world. So yeah, I would say those are my two sort of prominent, I would say, like non-athlete products that I've worked on. Although Chop is a very good athlete himself. He's a very good basketball player. He's a very good football player. We actually did. I was at the Super Bowl this year, and he played in a celebrity game. I made him a custom pair of cleats that looked like the Duck Boot, which is cool. It got a lot of press online and stuff, which is really cool. So it was fun seeing him out there playing on the football game, and are playing in the celebrity football game with the lights of, like, Odell Beckham Jr. and Terrell Owens and all these people and stuff. It was cool.
Well, we're gonna have to get Chopper involved in tennis. So you gotta push him in that direction, man. Just nudge him into the area
Sure,
of
sure.
tennis. We can get him to play. Because I mean, Omar, I
Absolutely.
believe it was what, like 300 million views that you all got with the duck boot.
Exactly what happened. It was, I think what did it for us was the Kai Cenat moment. I
Ah,
can't say enough. I mean, that kid Kai is just like, I mean, he's a marketing machine, and he's obviously one of the most recognizable people, I think, on the planet right now, at least amongst the younger demographic. And then those of us who know who he is. But that was a huge moment for us. And him and Choppa have been friends for a long time, and we were able to make it happen. Choppa was able to make it happen and go and gift them the shoe, and that really helped kind of make the product more visible, and people see it. And it was funny because, like, when all that was going on, and I just kind of think about, like, little moments. Like, I remember going to a Laker game, and, like, before I walked into the arena, this is without Choppa, like, it's just me and, like, my partner, and, like, we both got the boots on, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, are those duck boot things?" And it's like, and it's just like a nice, like, celebratory moment, because you're like, it's working. Like, the stuff we're doing is
mhm.
working. People know
Yep.
what it is, and, like, and that's the battle. Is there's so much stuff out there people can buy and are being sold to, or constantly being marketed to, and to be able to cut through that noise, and, like, people to recognize the product that you created, is a really special feeling. It never gets old, and I never take it for granted.
Nice.
That is awesome. Speaking of Factory Lab, um, at what moment and what clicked in your mind when you said, okay, I've been working for these other people, I've done all these really good things. It's time for me to kind of branch out and really own this whole thing. Um, Talk to us how that came about.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was for me. It was a few things. One was, I mean, prior to my time at Yeezy, I had worked for myself independently the entire time. I did some internships in school, but that was really it. And then when I got done with school, I was on my own the whole time, and I was just hustling. And I found my way to Asia and India and different places, and through different relationships that I had in the shoe business, and was able to build on that to grow. So being an entrepreneur was always in my blood and always something I want to do. Yeezy was the only moment where I stepped away from that to focus on that. But I knew how big of an opportunity it was. And I went into that role with intention that I was only going to be there for a short period of time. And I was going to leverage everything that I learned to be able to start, my own thing. But, what I'll say, in addition to that, the other thing that kind of set it off for me was, I was the head of the innovation lab there. My team, I was responsible for, bringing Kanye's shoes and his ideas to life, right? That's what me and my team did. There was a sketch and there was a drawing, or there was an idea. And then, we were the ones who would develop these into real shoe concepts, whether it was the foam runner or the 450 or the knit runner or the knit runner boot. These are all iconic shoes that went off to sell, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pairs of shoes. But what I found interesting was it was the how we got to these concepts and ideas. It's one thing to sketch a shoe on a piece of paper, but when you're going through the creation process and you're exploring how you need to make this shoe come to life, and what made it even more interesting in the fact of it being, Yeezy, a Yeezy product, was that it was different. It didn't, we challenged what a shoe looks like, right? Like, we were creating shoes that didn't look like shoes. They looked more like art pieces, and because of that, it required different types of processes in order to make those shoes. Some processes which didn't exist. Sometimes we had to invent the process in order to execute the thing that we were creating. And I just thought it was so interesting. Like, when I think about like old TV shows like Dirty Jobs and like things like that, where like, I think there's a lot of people out there who are interested in how these things come together and the way that they work. And like, and I saw the work that we were doing there, but no one was really seeing it. You were seeing the end product, but you weren't really seeing how he got there. And that was also like one of the sparks for Factory Lab is, I want to be able to create a culture and an environment where, through media and press and marketing, not only are we selling you a shoe, but we're actually showing you the entire process and showing you the story, the creation story, if you will, of how we even got there. And I think, in a day and age of just, again, so much information, so that we're being consumed by on a daily basis, I think if I'm able to take that extra step and actually show you how I got to the final product, I have faith that, like, you as a consumer would actually appreciate that, and maybe that would influence, you making a purchase of one of our products at some point down the road. So, for me, it was about transparency and about like being able to share these stories, in addition to obviously me already having the entrepreneurial bug, and just combining those two things together. And that's kind of what sparked, Factory Lab.
That's awesome. I appreciate that background, Omar. What something specific that I wanted to ask you, and this kind of goes back to something that I guess caught during the Visionary series, which I thought was just mind blowing. One of the points that you made about your father was that he was a cobbler,
Yep.
and you didn't know that until I that I mean, poof, that blew my mind. Please talk to us about when your father brought that up, and just what went through your mind when you learned that, knowing how much shoe design is just in your blood and in your spirit. That was
Yeah.
that was crazy.
Yeah, no, thank you, man, for that. Yeah, that I remember. Yeah, Keanu was tripping when I told him that story.
I
He
got
couldn't
chills, man.
believe it. And it's funny too. We did that all in one take. Like that all like we were here shooting all day and like we were just having a conversation like how you and I how we're all talking right now. We just happen to have two cameras just following us and we were just going from one area to the next to the next. And he's like, "What is this thing?" And then I start telling him his story. He's like, "What? Like you didn't know this? Like how did you not know this?" So, yeah, so to answer your question, so, my dad and my mom are from Jamaica. Um my father, when he was a teenager, worked at a shoe repair shop for a period of time. And, back in the day, if, a lot of shoemakers started as shoe repairmen, which actually makes a lot of sense. Like, how do you learn how to make a shoe? By repairing them, right? And like basically building them backwards is what you're doing as a repairman, right? The trades and one of the things that my father did in Jamaica was that. And he told me the story that started as a repairman and then maybe 2-3 years later he was able to sort of get enough experience and save up enough money to buy leather and actually make his own his first pair of shoes, which is cool. So about 10 years ago, I was visiting him in Florida, and we were there, and we were sitting at the table, just hanging out and talking in the kitchen. And I was telling him about a project that I was working on, and I don't remember exactly which one it was. It was some shoe project I was working on, and then I started talking about the shoe more technically than just like designing. I started talking about the construction and started talking about that. And I think there were some buzzwords that came up as I was talking about that rung a bell for him. And then he was like, "Oh, I understand that, or I know what that is." It was like, I used to make shoes in Jamaica. And I was like, "What?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then he told me what I just had mentioned, shared that story with me. And I was like, "What? Get out of here." Like, I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Wait, I'll show you." And then he gets a white piece of paper from the printer, and he pulls out a piece of paper and then he starts drawing on it. And as soon as he did the first stroke, I knew what he was doing. He was drawing a shoe pattern, which is, we call it a shell pattern. So it's like if you take apart a shoe and then you lay down like the upper pattern, it's basically a shell, right? And that's your shell. And then you sort of start building, the rest of the pieces on top of it. And then your lining and everything goes underneath. And then, you sort of you build it around the last and then sew it. And then it kind of all comes together. But it all starts with the shell pattern. The shell pattern is kind of the foundation of the whole thing. And he started drawing a shell pattern. And I was like, "Oh my God, like you really did make shoes." And he draws it and he cuts it out. And then he kind of like sort of lasts it, which basically means that like you're giving the shoe shape so that it starts looking like a shoe. And he was doing this and I was blown away. And I was like, "How am I just now finding out about this?" And like, his explanation was that he knew I was in the shoe business, obviously, but he thought because I did the work digitally and on a computer that there wasn't a correlation to how he made shoes. He didn't see the connection between like working on a computer and then him making just shoes by hand or repairing them by hand. He just thought it was two different worlds. But then when we had that conversation and I started using some of the terminology that I was using, that's when he understood like, "Oh wait, you're more involved in this whole process than I thought." And then that's where it kind of all happened. So like I said on the show, that day I learned that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
Amazing.
It's, that is amazing. I remember listening to that. Now, look, people, y'all watch that Visionary show. It's really, really, really good and insightful.
Check it out. Yeah, Visionaries, free on Roku. You can stream it.
There you go. And remember, we'll have a link in our notes. All right, Omar, we got to get some personal stuff here, some personal preference stuff. Don't be too politically correct here. All right. So you've already told us you rock with Rafa, which we totally feel you on. Who are some of your players on both the men's and women's side? They don't even have to be current players. Who were players that initially kind of caught your eye and was like, "That's my guy, that's my girl," or who are some current players that you're very excited about?
Oh man, there's a lot of players that I'm excited about. I really like Lorenzo Musetti right now. I know he had a big match that he won today in Monte Carlo. He's actually commented on a few of my Instagram posts too, which has been
Oh,
really cool. And then and on the men's side, who else am I liking right now? I mean, obviously, like the Americans, love Francis, love Taylor, love Tommy Paul, love Tommy
okay.
Paul's game, as well. I mean, Djokovic, you gotta love and respect Djokovic, man. Like, I know he gets a bad rap from, for whatever the reason is, but like, you just got to respect greatness where it's at. And, that brother's been doing it at a high level for a long time. And I absolutely, you know, just appreciate him when he's out there still giving us what he can before he hangs it up. Yeah, some of the older guys too as well. Like I've always been a big Dimitrov fan too as well. I love that one-handed backhand, that he's got cooking. Love Gael Monfils, got a ton. And then on the women's side, big Sabalenka fan. I love Arena Sabalenka and what she's doing. She's amazing out there. Like I really enjoy watching her. Like the strength and the power that she displays, when she plays and whatnot. Like she's amazing. She's really passionate out there, and you see it when she loses out there too. Like when that happens, it ain't pretty. When she lost that final against Madison in Australia, which I was so happy, just like everybody else was, for Madison winning that. I've never met her before or anything, but like I think everybody felt like they knew her in that moment, and it was just so happy to see her win that slam. Didn't think it was gonna happen at this stage. I'm sure she probably didn't think it was gonna happen at this stage, but that was amazing to see. Obviously, Coco, what Coco's doing, as well. And it won't be long before she's back on, she's holding up the big trophies again, as well. And a lot of other strong women, man, out there as well. My wife really enjoys, the women's game. I enjoy the women's game, too, as well. Like I said, we're just big tennis fans. So I just love seeing, the newcomers coming up. I love that kid, that French kid Fees. Like I like his game and the way he's out there playing and what he's doing, and how he took out Zverev. Was that in Miami when he took him out in the? I think he took him out there, and just that grit and determination that he's got on the court. And yeah, I just I'm a big fan of a lot of players, both on the men's and women's side, and just really enjoy being out there and watching some of the juniors, and seeing that. I remember watching like Amanda Anisimova, like
Anderson.
as a junior, and watching her as a junior, and then seeing her now on like the pro level and stuff, which is really cool. So yeah, no, that's been fun. And getting into legends, man. I had a really cool opportunity. This is a funny story, actually. I had an opportunity last year, at the end of last year. This is how Nick and I actually met. And the USTA was kind enough to invite me to one of their fantasy camps last year in Orlando. And I got to go to the national headquarters, or the national campus, sorry, for this fantasy camp. And I was there amongst like a group of other professionals and business people and stuff like that, and got to play tennis with the likes of the Bryan brothers, and Nick Monroe and Sam Querrey, and Cece Bellis and Christina McHale. So it was really cool. Me and Cece were out there like exchanging forehands. I think she was a little surprised that I could kind of keep up with her a little bit out there. So it was that was a really cool experience. Hopefully, I get invited back to do it again this year. But that was really fun. And then yeah, Nick and I were able to connect and become friendly there. Murphy Jensen, who developed into a good buddy of mine. Shout out to Murph. That brother's got an incredible story, and what he's been able to
Yeah.
do, and all the people that he's inspiring, and what he's doing through with his platform. So I'm happy to see him out there doing his thing. So it just makes me excited, man, just getting closer and more into the tennis community, being at the Taste of Tennis and meeting you guys and just being around the game and people is something I've wanted for a long time, and I'm excited that like I've been able to build the relationships that I've been able to inside of the game and will continue to do going forward.
Love that. Love that. Any other plans from a tennis perspective for the rest of the year? You going to any specific events? Will we see you at the U.S. Open? What's on your calendar, bro?
Man, listen. I was watching Monte Carlo, and I was like, man, I wish I was there right now. Like, I am planning. I'm gonna do my best to be in Monte Carlo next year when that happens. But no, in terms of the my tennis calendar for the rest of the year, definitely when the hard court season sort of swings back around. You'll see me out there. I'll probably try and hit some of the smaller ones, like the DC Open and maybe Cincinnati. Actually, I have a connection into the Rogers Cups, so to the Montreal side. So if that works out, maybe I may end up pulling up there. But I'm always at the U.S. Open now. My wife and I, we moved. We've been in LA for 6 years now, and the Indian Wells has obviously become our new sort of like home tournament that we go to. But the U.S. Open was our main one because we lived in Brooklyn for so long, and we would go to that tournament every year, and we always went opening day and would stay all day. That was our routine.
Yeah.
No, but in the last 3 years since like COVID sort of ended, we've been going every year again. So flying back, and it's been really cool to go back there. So you'll definitely see me at the U.S. Open. The Rogers Cup. I'm sorry, not the Rogers Cup, but the Laver Cup is going to be in San Francisco this year. So may end up pulling up to that too as well. And no. So you'll see me at a few events for sure this year.
Oh, I love to hear that. You will definitely see us in Cincinnati. You will definitely see us at the U.S. Open. And I think when we were at Taste of Tennis, we were all talking about, I think we'll be in Australia in January.
Yeah,
Didn't you say?
yeah, that's on. Listen, if what I got cooking on the tennis side like does what I think it's gonna do, I'm gonna be right there with you in Australia. So 100%.
Nice. Okay,
Yeah.
before we get ready to wrap this up, now when Isaac and I met, we actually did not meet over tennis.
Mm,
We met over music.
wow.
And one of the things we always, and in case you didn't know, this guy is Peebo Bryson. I mean, this dude has a voice that is insane, and I'm sure you're going to hear it at some point. But we always like to ask, who's in your headphones? Who do you like? Who do you listen to?
Right now, oh man. I mean, I listen to a little bit of everything. My playlist is all over the place, but I gotta throw my boy NLE Choppa in there, even though he's like a slightly younger generation than I am. But like, there's a lot of his music I like, and he's been really expanding, his palette and what he's been doing, and I'm just proud of him and what he's doing on the music front. And then all the artists that I'm working with, I listen to. So that's NLE, and that's Agnes Mo, who's like really popular Indonesian pop star who's based here in the States. She makes really amazing, music. She's a singer, but does music for the clubs and music for all different types of vibes that you're looking for. La Russell, who's really popular Bay Area, is blowing up right now. Like his trajectory, his ceiling is so just like infinitely high. It's amazing, and I love seeing what he's doing. And him and I got some stuff, that we're cooking up right now. So LaRussell, he's just an incredible artist, very conscious rapper, someone who believes in his people and his community and uplifting them and exposing them to things that are different and new with his backyard concerts that he does. That's how he started, man. He would just do concerts in people's backyards and just blew up, from there. And then my boy Simba, man, who's another rapper who's like, also just like on the rise. He's had a movie that just came out called Freaky Tales, produced by Tom Hanks. He plays E40 in it, and it just dropped last week. It's in theaters, so after you watch Visionaries, go to a theater near you and check out Freaky Tales. And then aside from that, I like a lot of old school music too as well. You might hear me listening to some I don't know, some old blues or jazz stuff, as well. Like, I've always been just like, I don't know, sound is kind of what always like what attracted me. It would be less about like the sound is what would introduce me to the artist, but like I need to be able to vibe, with the music. And seriously, I'm joking. I'm not joking. You look at my playlist, it's all over the place. Like it is everywhere. I got everything. I said I got like NLE Choppa, and then like I don't know, like I'm trying like Bill Withers, or something like that, like on the same track, like on the same playlist, right? Like that's just me.
Love that. Old school Omar. All
Yep.
day, every day.
Yep.
Well, Omar, anything else that you want to potentially share with those who are listening, viewing this particular episode? Anything you want to finalize or finish off with, my friend?
Yeah, no, I'll just say, like, listen, anyone who's, willing to listen, just, believe in yourself, whatever it is that you want to do, no matter how old you are or how young you are, anything is possible. You just gotta have that confidence, belief, and be consistent and be dedicated and passionate about it. And it will come true, whatever it is that you're trying to do. Take my story as a testament of that. I had no clue that shoes would take me where I'm at, right now, and allow me to see the world the way that I've seen, and develop and cultivate the relationships that I've been able to cultivate. If I thought my cards were already dealt, the way that they were, when I was a kid, but just through exposure and being around people who believe in you, and having good friends. My dad used to tell me a long time ago, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And it's true. So you want to make sure you surround yourself around like-minded people who are on the same wavelength as you are, that are there to support you, help you, that you can learn from and grow with, and go from there. And aside from that, check out Factory Lab, FCTRY LAB on Instagram. Give us a follow, a little holler, send me a DM if you want to say hi. I do my best to respond when I can. And make sure you watch Visionaries and check it out. But that's all I got to say. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Words of wisdom from the man, Omar Bailey. And I tell you what, we're going to take you up on that offer to come visit you at Factory Lab and,
Yeah,
and get the tour.
please,
So we will
please,
talk about that offline and make that happen. But
let's
we
do it.
want to just thank you because we know how busy of a guy you are. And we really appreciate the time that you took, not only to talk to us, but to the whole what we call BOT fam. And
Yeah.
we look forward to all the great things that you're going to do in the sport of tennis and beyond. And we can't wait for that announcement
Yes.
on
Yes.
the
Yeah.
tennis shoe. So thank you
Thank you.
once again. To our BOT fam, we hope you have enjoyed this episode. Once again, make sure you check out the Visionaries, Season 1, Episode 3 on Omar Bailey. Check our notes for a link to the show. So with that, this has been your boy Bryce.
And this is your boy Isaac.
And with Omar Bailey, on behalf of the podcast, we are Brothers on Tennis. Everyone, be well.